All right, well, let me link here. All right, so today we're going to finish up site plans. Anybody have any questions on site plans at all so far? Not too bad, really, right? I think more than anything, it's just kind of remembering all of the steps that come with a site plan. So we'll go back over all of those steps today, and then we are going to throw in the idea of curves. So how do we, remember how to draw site plans, and then how do we draw our site plans and we use curves, okay? So I'm going to start a blank drawing to draw my site plan in. So I'm going to click on Start Drawing here. And first few things I need to remember about drawing a site plan. And first thing, site plans are drawn in decimal format, right? Even if for example, if I look at I'm going to draw this site plan with curves on page 3-21. And if you look at that, there's a lot of kind of weird things that go on with site plans, right? So civil engineers draw them in decimal format, and they use them, of course. And then architects use site plans to site plan their drawings, right? So you will get a site plan from a civil engineer, and you'll need to use that to create an architectural site plan, essentially, right? But what that involves, so there is a translation between the civil and the architect, right? So what that means is that when an architect gets a site plan, it is 12 times too small. And so you'll get a CAD file, and first thing you'll have to do is take the file and size it up by a factor of 12, just like we did in class. So you'll scale it up by a factor of 12. Now the other kind of weird thing about site plans, if you ever have to draw one, right, as an architect, you have a piece of paper and you don't have a CAD file and you have to recreate it, right? We can do that. But again, it's drawn in decimal. You will have to draw it in decimal and then size it up. The tricky part is that when I look at this site plan, I see that, let's start at the point of beginning and move to the right, 187.53 foot, right? And you're like, well, wait a minute. It says foot there, but I'm supposed to be drawing in decimals, so, right? So in reality, we are drawing in decimals, but they do put the foot mark after the dimension on there. You will see that, right? But you all probably have found out in trying to draw site plans that if you type in 187.53 foot with the foot mark, it doesn't work, right? Has anybody run into that? You will if you haven't, right? Made a mistake. So there are some tricky things about site plans, but just know as a civil engineer working in an office, you'll use them, you'll draw them in decimal, you'll use them as is. You will send them to architects and other engineers, and we will have to size them up, right, and all that good stuff. So let's talk about creating a site plan with curves. And if you notice on page 2-21, there's what we call a curve table on that page as well. And so I want to talk a little bit about the curve table. You will end up drawing that eventually, but you won't do it today because you don't know how to do text just yet, right? So we'll talk about that in a little bit, actually. Probably next week, because next week we're going to start learning text, okay? All right, so let's look at this site plan. And the first thing, I'm going to just kind of start drawing the site plan, and when we get to the curves over there on the left-hand side, I will talk about how to draw the curves. And really it was just kind of we've worked up to this point, right? They're not really that difficult. Okay, so I started a blank drawing. The first thing I want to do is create a couple of layers for my site plan to live on. So I'm going to click on Layer Properties, and I'm going to click New. And my first layer that I create, I'm going to call C-Prop, Enter. And then I'm going to change the color because it's a property line. On our last one, we had kind of that dash dot. On this one, we just really have a continuous line, right? So on this one, it's valid to just have a continuous line that's a thick line. And on the other one, they asked for a dash line. But here we'll just choose red for that line, make it thick, and we'll just keep it continuous. We don't have any easements on this one, so I'm not going to create an easement line or a setback line. I do have those chords. So the lines that are dashed on the left-hand side, those are called chords. And I'm going to create a chord layer just so that I can distinguish those from the property line. So we'll just call this C-chord. And I'm going to make those, in comparison to the red lines, they're a lot thinner, so I'll maybe make them a cyan and hit OK. And then I will make them a hidden line type. Let's see. Hidden. Okay. Click on hidden, hit OK. Looks pretty good. All right, I'm going to draw the property lines first. I'm going to double click on property line to make it current, close out of that. I'm in decimals. If I wasn't sure if I was in decimal units or another type of units, I would type units and hit enter. Right, and decimals pops up, and precision, we've got everything looking pretty good. And it's time for me to start drawing my site plan, okay? Another thing I want to bring up about these site plans, because you'll likely run into this a little bit on the drawing site plan with curves on the next page, the 3 different lots, okay, is that I want to remind you that, somebody erased it off the board, dang it. One of our other CAD instructors, she's a civil engineer, and she had explained on the board surveyor units. Remember we were kind of talking about that. Anyway, so one thing I want to note when I look at this site plan, I note that if I start at the point of beginning and I kind of move in the northeastern direction, I notice that my first surveyor unit is north 36 degrees 19 minutes 40 seconds east, and there is a northeast bearing on it. Okay, and that makes sense because that from point of beginning that line is moving in the northeast direction, right? And then I look at the next one, the north 57 degrees 0 minutes 30 seconds west, and that line is moving northwest, right? So the bearings on all of these are kind of headed in the right direction. If I, so I've decided to essentially start drawing at the point of beginning and moving to the right. If I had moved to the left, do you see how the bearing is southeast? If I had drawn that line from point of beginning, instead of going from, the bottom to the top-ish left, right, I would have created the same exact correct line with regard to dimension, but it would have gone from, that point of beginning to the top left down to the bottom right. Okay, so the line would have been correct. The actual diagonal angle of the line would have been correct, but it would have just gone the opposite direction I wanted it to. Okay. And you will run into one of those situations on the next assignment where you start, regardless of what way you start drawing this assignment, you're going to have one of these going the wrong direction. Like the line is correct, but the bearing makes it go opposite of the way it should. And so you're just going to move the line into place, essentially. Okay? That's Jeff Plant tricking you with your assignments, making you think about it. All right, so let's start drawing the site plan. I checked my decimal units, but it just kind of occurred to me that I did not set my angles to surveyor units. So I'm going to change this to surveyor units. I'm going to make sure the precision is this one, right? I'm going to hit OK. And I have everything set the way I should. So I click on, you could do a line, you could create a polyline, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to click on polyline. Click, and I'm going to type in at 187.53, and again, don't be confused into thinking that you have to add the foot mark, right? Because you don't. We're drawing in decimal format here. 187.53 at an angle of north 36 degrees 19 minutes 40 seconds east. Enter. Okay, so line number 1. Oh, shoot, I can't, it's kind of not working. I can't pan very well, and dang it, I started with a polyline. I really want to keep the polyline, but I have to hit escape. What is happening there is my drawing board is being limited a little bit. And you can fix it a couple ways. I can hit escape and try and zoom extents, or I can escape and type regen, R-E-G-E-N, to regenerate the limits of my drawing, okay? But, I mean, the point of what I was saying is that, I had to break my polyline, but no big deal. We can always go back and we can join it together, okay? PL, polyline, enter. click, and I can choose to create the north-west line, or I can choose to create the one that goes right across the middle. Either one is fine, right? But I'm going to type at 148.47 at an angle of north 57 degrees 0 minutes 30 seconds west. Okay, enter. I've got my second line, and now my next line is going to be at 10.25 at an angle of north 17 degrees 30 minutes 0 seconds east. All right, so I'm just going all the way around creating these. I've got 2 more segments before I hit the curves. And the next one is directly west. So you'll see there's not a surveyor unit attached with it because it's directly west. So I'm going to turn on my ortho, and I want to create a straight line. And I'm going to do a direct input. So I'm going to point in the direction I want to go, and I'm going to type 130.28, enter, and there's my west direction. One more. I'm going to type at 25.26 at an angle of south 17 degrees 6 minutes 6 seconds west. Okay. All right, so I get all the way to there, and now I have some curves that I need to create, right? And the first step in creating my curves, I have to essentially draw a chord length first, right? So I have that dashed line that says 26.22 on it. That is the chord length of that, that arc, essentially, that curve that I'm going to generate. And then I have to use the arc tool, the arc command, to create that arc, the curve, okay? And how do I create the curve, the right dimension? Well, and how do I get the chord to go the correct bearing? Well, if you look over to the right, there's a curve table. And if I look at my first curve that I'm drawing, which is C3, I've got C3 in that curve table, and I have a bearing. So south 39 degrees, 33 minutes, 29 seconds east. Great. And I also have a chord length, 26.22. And I also have a radius, which is 16 feet. So the way that we go about drawing curves is we draw the chord using the, I guess somewhat the drawing, but also the curve table, okay? And then we use the arc command to create the curves, all right? So the way that I usually like to work is I like to draw all the chords. So I'll switch layers now, and I'll draw the chords, and then I will go back and I will draw the curves. So I'm going to hit escape. I am going to click on layer properties, or I could have just switched, I don't know why I went into layer properties. I'm going to just switch layers to chord, and I'm going to click on line, and I'm going to snap to my endpoint, click, and I am going to type, let's see, at 26.22 at an angle of, and now I go to my curve table at an angle of south 39 degrees 33 minutes 29 seconds east. Looks good. One more curve, curve number 2, which is 78.24 at an angle of, and curve number 2, I go up to the curve table, south 41 degrees 9 seconds 9 minutes 52 seconds east. It just doesn't feel right coming out when I say it, just still. So let me make sure I got that one right. 78.24. Looks good. There we go. No, I got something wrong. Let's see what I did wrong. South. Oh, let's see. 49. Oh, I did. Yeah, 41 degrees or 49. No, 41. 09. 52. Well, I did something wrong. Oh, I know what I did wrong. I forgot the at symbol. And when I forgot the at symbol, instead of drawing from that last point and moving downward right? It measured off the origin and shot a line that direction. So I'm going to hit escape and undo. Oh, and I think I undid my, I don't want to undo both lines. I'm going to delete that, come back up to line, click, at curve number 2, 78.24 at an angle of south 41 degrees, 9 minutes, 52 seconds east. Okay, looks good. There we, oh, yeah, that looks right. That looks about right. Okay, so I have to create my curve, and then I have my last chord. So I've got at, and that's curve number 1. I'm going to do 39.80 at an angle of south 25 degrees, 23 minutes, 5 seconds west. Okay, so I've got my last little chord there. Okay, now I still have a little bit of property line to draw, right? I have to draw across here to my property line boundary. I still have this last one to draw, right? But now I can, if I want, create my curves, and I'm going to, all right? So the way that I'm going to draw my curves is I'm going to use the arc tool here, and I'm going to use, I can use any one of these, but start, center, length is a pretty good option for this because we have an arc length essentially, right, to generate this. So start, center, length. So here's my start, click, and then my center. The center of this is going to be, let me just create a little visual here. So each of these is based off of a circle, right? The arc lengths that we are going to create. And so the center of that is going to be, we have the start, we have the end, and then the center of that is going to be we're going to use the radius, right? Which is going to be given to us in the curve table. So for chord length number 1, right, it's going to be 55 feet, chord 2, 55 feet, chord 3, 16 feet, okay? All right, so I have my arc, start, center, angle. Actually, I'm starting to think maybe this might not be the best option. I think I'm going to, I was going to do length. You know, disregard what I just said. Let's do a different one. Let's do start, end, radius. Sorry, change my mind. Start, end, radius. Okay, let's do that. I think it's going to work a little bit better. All right, so I have my start. And not get confused that we have 2 lines right here, not just one. Start, and I have my end point, and then for my radius, I've got that's curve number 3, 15 or 16 foot, 16. Uh-oh, something happened, right? Let me hit delete. Of course something happened. Arc and I don't get along. Start, end, and my radius. I think maybe I don't know what I did. 16 foot, enter. Enter. Okay, so, and just 16. There we go. I don't know what I had done. Now, let me show you something else that could happen when you do this. I'm gonna come up and use that same arc. Start, end, radius. Start, end. Okay, now if I type 16, okay, do you see what happened? I did the exact same operation, just in reverse, and it did the opposite direction. So the first time that I created this, I started at the bottom, right? That was my start. My end point was right here, and it created a counterclockwise curve, right? So it went that direction, and that's a positive direction. The second time, I started here, and I went to here, and it created a negative arc direction. Confused, right? Which way is which? Where do I start? How do I visualize it, right? Again, this is why I don't like arcs. Anyway, this is one of those things where I always think that I have it correct in my mind, right? And I've been doing this for a long time, but I think, okay, I start down here, and if I move this direction, it goes positive, and then every time I get it wrong, right? Because I do it the wrong way because, I think I'm visualizing it the right way. So don't, feel bad if you get it wrong because we can always just redo it. But if you're going to move in the counterclockwise direction, start from the bottom, move to the top, we get that counterclockwise. Here, we're moving downward this way, we get that clockwise rotation and get the arc on the other side. Okay, so let's do our next arc. And our next arc, we want it to, oh my gosh, and the arc is on the other side.
Can I
What?
ask a question real quick
Yeah.
about the west, the 130.28? How do you enter that? Because I've entered it a few times and it won't. I'm doing something wrong.
130.28, not with foot.
Right, I did that.
Okay, so click on the endpoint.
So at 130.28?
You're just going to type 130.28. It's just a direct entry. Yep. Yep. You got it.
Thanks.
Okay. So I obviously wasn't paying attention to which direction the arc was going, thinking I'd actually drawn it correctly. So I will do it the other way. Okay, let's do it one more time here. Arc. Okay, so we are going to start. We have our endpoint, click, and our radius is 16 feet. There we go. Okay. So the next arc is going to move in the opposite direction, so we want to start at the bottom, go to the top, right, and generate our arc. Same arc. So click, shift right click endpoint, and curve number 2 is 55 feet. There we go. Okay. And again, I'll just, we've kind of gone over this, but I feel like this is a really confusing topic where, right, I start from the top, I go to the bottom, and it's going to be, it's going to generate the other direction, right? So just be aware that if you get a mistake like that, then that's what's happening. You just have to, instead of going from the bottom to the top, you go from the top to the bottom if needs be, okay? All right, so we want our arc, the third arc, curve number 1, to generate on this side. So we're going to start at the bottom, go to the top, and I click on arc, click, click, and that radius is curve number 1, and that has a 55-foot radius. There we go. Not bad, right? And then we just finish off our site plan. So I'm going to change my layer to property line. I'm going to reinitiate my line or polyline command. Okay, click, and I'm going to type at 141.07 at an angle of south 43 degrees 24 minutes 9 seconds east. Enter. And again, we always draw that last line just in case there's some type of mistake going on with the property boundary so that you pick it up, right, before it is a mistake not on paper. We have one more line to draw, and again, it's super tempting. I'm always super tempted just to be like, oh, it's right, let's just draw it, right? But we don't want to do that, so I'm going to click on line, click, type at 191.38 at an angle of south 86 degrees 12 minutes 55 seconds west. There we go. Connects right where it should, right? All right, now we have our site plan drawn. We've drawn it in decimal units, which means that for a civil engineer, it's the right size, right, for whatever you do. And for an architect or other type of engineer like structural, mechanical, electrical, it is 1/12 the size it needs to be, okay? So I'm gonna scale this up by a factor of 12. I'm gonna draw a line next to it. I think this is maybe good practice, right? Just draw some type of element next to it, because the number one mistake, there's 2 mistakes I see on this assignment when I grade them, and I'll hopefully be able to grade this weekend because I will have 2018 on my laptop. Jameson gets it done before we go to the U. But the number one mistake I see on here is not that, well, students do forget to scale it up. They just plain forget, right? They get it drawn, they think, oh, phew, right, it's drawn. But they forget to scale it up, period. But the other thing that I see a lot of is you scale it up and then you think, did I scale it? I know I have to scale it. It doesn't look any different on the screen, right? So other than kind of measuring it, which I think sometimes you forget to do, you just scale it again, right? So what I see happening is either no scale, but I think by and far, I see more people scaling it twice than not scaling at all, okay? So I think just maybe a good practice is to draw a little piece of line segment next to this, and then we're gonna scale it up, and then that way you can visually tell that you have scaled this thing up, okay? So I'm gonna type scale, enter, grab these objects, leave that little guy alone so I know, I can see if it's been scaled, hit enter. I'm going to pick a base point, which I will just pick as my point of beginning to be safe, or just to, convenience. Click, and I'm going to type 12. 12, enter, and it scales it up by a factor of 12. Okay, and so now essentially, if I needed to use this in an architectural fashion, it would be ready to go. Okay, so couple things though before we actually finish this. I look at it and I think, well, everything looks pretty good. Oh, I forgot to actually put those on the property line layer, right? So I'm going to match properties, MA, enter, click on the red, click on my arcs, just my arcs, and match properties. Okay, so I got those two. Another way we can change the layers, I can select the object, I can use my drop down and change it to property line. Okay. The chords, I can leave them there. You can choose to visually turn them off, right, through the layer dialog box. You can leave them on. It doesn't really matter. I guess it's kind of nice to have them on so that if someone else had to generate this, they would see them, right? Anyway, so you can leave them on when you print these, whatever. Now this says determine the plot scale and print on an 11 by 17 paper. And I'm fine with you creating PDF and just submitting PDFs. That's fine. So the next thing we have to do, right, we're not done yet, and you have to scale it up, and now it's time for us to plot it on an 11 by 17 piece of paper, okay? So we drew it, we used the curve table to draw it, we scaled it up by a factor of 12, right? We now need to determine the scale factor, print it from model space, and one more thing that we forgot to do. Can anybody figure out one thing that is missing here? That's exactly it. Yep, LT scale, right? So we have these chord lengths here, and they're showing, and they're correct, but they're not dashed, right? The bane of, again, I say this all the time, hatch and LT scale are the bane of my existence in AutoCAD. Well, in XREFs when they won't stay attached, which you all will get to experience as well soon enough. But there are a few quirky things in AutoCAD that are, kind of consistently you have to work on getting to work, and this is one of them. All right, so let's determine our scale factor, and then let's print this to PDF, essentially, okay? Oh boy, what is this? Okay, all right, so I'm going to draw a line. And I'm just gonna, just so visually I can look at this and I can measure it. DIST, click, click, and I've got a, oh, I know what the problem is. I was like, wait a minute, that, we're still in decimals. We need to switch over to architectural, right? See, there's so many steps I even forget sometimes. There we go. Okay, now we're in architectural. Distance. So to change to architectural, I just came down here and I have this little shortcut, right? But if you don't have it, we're going to type units, enter, and change to architectural here. Okay. Otherwise you'll do what I just did, and I looked at the decimals thinking, wait a minute, those are decimals. Distance, click, click, and I have 283 by 268. So let me write this down. Okay. Okay, 283 by 268. All right. I go to my booklet and I look at my plot factor chart. I go down to page size, sheet size, and I go down to 11 by 17. and I bring it all the way over to the side here. Let's see, 283 by 268, 283 by 268. So that brings me down to 1 inch is equal to 30 feet. So 330 by 510. So I'm going to draw a rectangle, REC, enter. At 330 foot, comma, 510 foot. Yes, now that we're back in architectural, we have to add the foot mark. If you forget to do that, when you hit enter, your cursor will just do nothing, essentially. Enter. Now I'm just going to M for move. I'm going to move this rectangle somewhat, center it around there, looks good. Delete. Final step here, right? I've got my site plan drawn. I've used the curve table to draw the curves. I have established the plot scale. I have drawn my plot region. Now it's time for me to look at my LT scale. My plot scale factor is 360, which means that my scale factor, or my LT scale factor, will be 180. LT scale, enter, 180, enter. Oh, and it worked, phew, right? Every time you do it, you think, oh, I hope it's going to dash today. If those lines had not dashed and you had everything correct, the first troubleshooting method I would use is I would type regen, enter, and just make sure that my screen had regenerated what I had, set here. The second thing, if 180 didn't work, I would try 90. And if 90 didn't work, I would go to 45. And if 45 didn't work, I would try 20, right? So I would just kind of do this in half increments until it started to dash, right? And I'm going smaller. I'm not usually going larger. I don't, dashes are going to show when you have a small piece of dash, which is solid, and a small piece of void, right? So if I make that scale larger, those solids are going to get larger, 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 and encroach on the voids and make it look more solid. So I want it to get the scale to be smaller, okay? And final step here, I would print. Control P, Adobe PDF, and we're going to do 11 by 17 size. We want the window to plot, so it bumps me out. Click, click, center the plot. Okay, and we are going to choose our pens, LaserJet CTB. If you don't choose LaserJet CTB, your print will be either in color, right, or it will be grayed out, or you won't have any line weights essentially. This is going to be portrait, and I'm going to uncheck fit to paper. Now here's something kind of tricky. I don't have a 1 inch is equal to 30 feet scale factor here, okay? And I do have a 1 to 30, but that is different than 1 inch is equal to 30 feet, okay? Go figure. So I don't want to choose that. So what's happening here essentially is I don't have a predefined scale factor in here to be able to print this, okay? But we do have a pretty simple solution to this. I'm just going to choose custom, and I'm going to choose 1 inch is equal to, this one will be the scale factor, 360. Now when I had just selected the window, let me just show you. When I just selected the window, click, click, okay, and I had fit to paper, do you see it was pretty close, 368.4 units, right? So it's pretty close to our scale factor, but not quite, right? And it's essentially with that extra units that it has there, it brings it in just a tiny bit and includes the border in that scale, okay? So I'm going to uncheck fit to scale, fit to paper, check for my scale factor, which is not there. Type 1 to 360 units. Okay, I always preview. I like to make sure everything's looking good. Oh, I forgot to delete my little line, which I'll do. But let's see if we can, I want to see if we can get some of these errors work. Nope, that error did not work. We'll do fit to paper. There's a good error, right? There's a fit to paper. Okay, well, fit to paper means we're going to include all the geometry that is even on the boundary of that, right? So if you get that, it's wrong. Points off. And I will be grading this weekend now that I have AutoCAD on my laptop. And if I have center the plot and I preview it thinking that's the problem, oh, I've got the border all the way around my drawing now, right? Still an error. So that means that I still have the units, the scale is off, so I'm going to type 360, preview. Looks perfect, right? Except for my little line I would have had to delete. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK. This creates a PDF, which is a digital file. So instead of popping a piece of paper out of the printer, it says, hey, where would you like to save this digital file? So I'm just going to save it, in my AutoCAD project. And this is drawing with curves. Enter. And there's my site plan. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything here. Hold on one second. Like I said, I think today was going to be, we were just finishing up site plans, and then Monday we're going to start text, which is kind of a big topic. What is today? The 21st. Oh, it's almost the first day of fall, right? Or is today the first day of fall? Is today the solstice? Is that right? At midnight? Is it midnight, I think? All right, let's see. Okay. Okay, we're good. All right, so here's our site plan. One other thing I want to show you, and that will be all for today. We're just going to, finish up this site plan topic. Don't forget to do your quiz this week. There is a quiz posted. I want to show you how to go about the next assignment. Okay, so we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. And I want to show you what I mean by when I say the bearing works, but the line can go the other direction. And then I'll just let you work or whatever you want to do. If you look at the drawing site plan with curves on page 2-22, we have 3 lots, and you won't be able to do the text just yet, okay, so don't worry too much about that. But next week you will be able to do the text. So once we learn that, you'll be able to do it. But I'm just going to talk through this site plan, right? I'm not going to do it for you. You'll do this one on your own, but I'm just going to talk through it, okay? We have a curve table. We do have some curves. I have a start point, which is at 0, 0. And I want to analyze this and kind of look at how I would go about drawing it, right? So I look over to the right and I see I have a northwest line. So from point of beginning to the first bearing on to the right, it says north 89 degrees, 49 minutes, 0 seconds west. So if I were to draw moving to the right, I would have a northwest bearing, right? So that means that, right? This thing kind of looks like this, looks like that, and looks like that. And I've got these lines in between. So if I start here and I move that direction, I can draw that first line and it will be correct. But instead of going that way, it'll go like that, right? And you'll think, oh, it's wrong. It's going the wrong way. It's not really wrong. You could just grab this and you could move it to there, right? And you'd still have the correct line, okay? But, all of those on the bottom are northwest, and so you look at it and think, well, if I move one, I'm going to have to move them all, right? So maybe it doesn't make any sense. So I look at the other, arm right here, this line right here, and I see that I have a northeast direction. So if I start at point of beginning and I move northeast, that's correct, right? Okay, so I'm going to draw that way. So I draw northeast, and then I get to that first curve, C22, and I have a northwest direction. Oh shoot, right? Is that right? So if I draw from here to there, right, that's northeast essentially. So when I draw that northwest direction, it's going to move that way. So there's 2 things I can do. I can draw the line and then I can move it into place, okay? And I don't know if I've said this or not. I don't remember saying it, but you could also, instead of having it the direction being northwest, so curve 22, you could do southeast, and it would be exactly the same. It would be correct. So instead of typing in north 70 degrees, 33 minutes, 55 seconds west, I could type in south 70 degrees, 33 minutes, 55 seconds east, okay? So I could move the line, or I could draw it with the other directions, okay? I get to curve 21, and that is a northwest direction. So I'm looking at this thinking, I'm kind of either whatever direction I go, my lines are somewhat going to be going the wrong direction, right? So I just have to, I think going upward drawing is a better direction than going, going to the right. So I think I'm just going to switch the directions on those and start drawing those correctly. And then we get over to, so we have a curve here, we have a curve here, we have a curve here, and then we have a line segment starting, and those are southeast, right? So essentially the way you'll draw this, you'll draw from here to here. This line and that curve right there, these two lines on those two curves, you'll have to draw a little bit different. And then you can move all the way around it and everything should work out pretty well, okay? When you draw this, you know, you have an easement or setback that is offset 10 feet, right? So you'll draw that once you get back into architectural units. But what that sort of indicates to me is that if I create this site plan using a polyline, right, then once I'm done with it, I can just offset it, and all of that, those polylines will offset in, right? It's pretty good thinking. But then I look up, so I look up here at the top, and I think, well, you know, I have the top, and you do have to draw this road up here as well, which is a solid line, okay? I think, well, if I offset this line right here, okay, if it's a polyline, then everything will offset, and I will get everything instead of just this line up here, right? So you have to think about this in terms of sequencing as well. So making sure you draw it right, making sure you move the right direction, right? And then sequencing it so you draw the whole thing, and then when it's all separate pieces, you maybe offset this piece first, right? And then you go back and you join them all together and you offset them to get your easement, right? And then you have kind of these middle lines that you're gonna have to draw, okay? So, you know, think through it. I've kind of explained this one, but in the future, if you do this professionally, you're gonna have to really think through it, right? So your assignment will be to draw these two assignments. So drawing site plan with curves and drawing site plans with curves with the lot lines, these lot 1, 2, and 3, okay? And, all right, any other questions on site plans at all? Yep.
Sorry, I just missed the command to make your dashed line look dashed. What was that again?
LT scale.
Okay.
Yep, line type scale. So it's a good example. So if you forget something like that, right? And this, not just for you, but for anybody else who forgets a command, usually, and I say usually because it never works when I do an example, right? But how do I get my lines to dash in AutoCAD, right? And hopefully, so it'll say you can load a line type, dash lines appearing as solids. That sounds promising, right? So we look here and check your LT scale, right? So then maybe that'll jog your memory. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, okay. I'm gonna, I'll let you guys work, or if you wanna leave, whatever you can. I'm gonna, you know, obviously be around to answer questions. But our first Architecture Club social will be next week. It's gonna be on Thursday. It's gonna be Thursday the 28th at 1 o'clock. It's gonna be upstairs in 506. You know those conference rooms upstairs that have glass by the classroom up there? It's just gonna be up there. It's gonna be very casual. They're gonna, the officers have pizza and drinks, and they just want people to come and sign up, and we're going to talk about the next event we're going to be doing, and just kind of talk about things, very casual. Our dues are going to be $10 a semester, so I think they've designed a t-shirt, so if you want to order a t-shirt you can. But should be pretty fun. But yeah, just start passing out some flyers, and if you haven't, if you want to join, I sent out a link through Canvas, so you can join and just be a part of the Canvas group. If you want to come, you can to the events, but if you don't want to, you don't have to, right? It's pretty casual. All right, guys.